heavily on our engineer for advice, on our legal, for legal advice, and the P&Z for guidance on that. Where do I come in? According to the ordinances, the city administrator is the building official, or the official in that capacity, or his designee, which Sandy handles that. The zoning administrator, I'm sorry. So, fee schedule, it'll show you what prices we've got at this point in time. Subdivision requirement checklist, subdivision name, description, plat requirements all the way down, pre-construction requirements all the way down, final plat requirements all the way down. Project engineer's signature. Building application. This is, all of this is handed to a developer that comes in, I want to develop in your city, what do I have to do? One of the things that the council has stated that we need to have more accessibility via website, so these people can get their information on that. We don't have that on the website. It states contact Cindy Nichols at this number, they call and they come.
So you can put that in a PDF form on the website for them to download?
Yes, that's something that I know that this council has wanted, and we will get to, because now that we're done with our insolvency plan and other projects, the building, the permits, the land use plan, that is our focus now. City of Floresville gives a website, and it gives information, when is a building permit required, how do I obtain a building permit? Yes, sir.
So a lot of the stuff we saw and were briefed on in some of the introductory pieces of this. Here's my concern.
Yes, sir.
And I want to take the opportunity, as you said, to read this with a little bit more detail. But let's just say a person's lived in a house on South 2nd Street for 45 years and they want to expand it to add another bedroom. Getting an engineer involved and two sets of design drawings and asbestos studies, is that appropriate for just adding on to a house? I mean, do we distinguish in this building permit process what is new construction and what is modification to an existing facility? And the other piece that's really not clear to me is that I don't want to start a new subdivision. The land, I bought the lot, it's already zoned residential. I want to build a house on that. This building process seems a bit cumbersome for somebody seemingly wanting to just build a house. With the planning and zoning review and do we distinguish that? Is there a different procedure for that?
Yes. The time that they'll come to P&Z is if they are a new construction, a new subdivision, that's when P&Z gets involved. And planning and zoning has undertaken, thank God, much more than what planning and zoning was first intended to do. They just zone the land, and that was it. You're zoning commercial, yes, you've got everything, we're done. Now they're getting into the, well, what are you going to build in there? What's it going to look like? How's it going to affect our city? Which is a process that we are going to get some definition on the land use plan more so that we needed for somebody. But yes, when somebody's going to add, and I think you had it on there, if it's an existing construction, what is that going to take, Eddie? None of that. Existing construction, add-ons or whatever, just goes to the permit.
Building that results in the addition of square footage to the footprint of the house. Additions could be carports, covered patios, sunroom, bedroom, and may require a building permit.
Okay, and so anything that's going to add to the square footage of the house requires a building permit.
Correct.
And then, so, get back up and
You have to have that, otherwise you get people adding on.
site plans, floor plans drawn to scale, exterior elevation plans, structural plans, foundation plans, engineers, foundation design letters, masonry on wood details, electrical plans, plumbing plans, energy compliance report for adding on a washroom to a house?
It's all, it's broken down, and these questions, now that you've got your information, Sherry's gonna take down, and I'm gonna get Cindy to answer those so we can follow, but it doesn't take that, like, what is an addition, any construction work done? 2 sets of floor plans to include electrical, mechanical, plumbing, site plan, which is what you were showing, property lines, and foundation and roofing plans. What is a remodel? It goes into that. Any interior and exterior construction work to maintain structures such as moving walls, replacing windows, major electrical plumbing. What does that require? 2 sets of plans to include all electrical, mechanical, and plumbing, if applicable. Electrical upgrades, plumbing upgrades, mechanical upgrades. One of the things that we are going to work on heavily is, or that's been worked on, and has been worked on for some time, is the ordinance, and I know that the council has requested, and it was requested back in November, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you want a copy of the ordinances? Sherry, could you give them a breakdown of what's being done to this point to make sure that, and I think Laura mentioned that in her budget report of having a budget allocation so we can update the book that has been in existence.
That's correct. Currently, what we're doing is looking through all of the old minutes, and the mayor's been helping us with this, and looking through the old minutes, looking at all of the ordinances, and comparing them to, if you notice the ordinances that you've received copies of, those are actually the ordinances like the one we passed tonight for the budget amendment. What we do is we take those signed, executed ordinances, and we send them to a company, and they send us these pages where it's rewritten, and we add them to our ordinance book. What we're currently doing is making sure that every ordinance that went through city council and has been passed in the last 5 years is included in the ordinance book that we currently have. If it has not, then we'll send them in as a package deal, they'll send it back, and we will at that point be able to hand you an ordinance book and say, this is complete. It includes the ordinances that started being passed, and what did we find, Mayor, 1968 was one of the first ordinances that was passed. And so it's a big undertaking to actually go through each one, because any amendment has to be done. It's a big process. We're getting really close to finishing up, and we hope to have that done here very quickly.
Can you give me a timeline on this? And I'm gonna jump, we're jumping agenda items on this one, but this is a significant issue. Ordinances. When we've gone into executive session and people are throwing ordinances in front of me to say I'm being held to the standard. And we have ordinances in place for building. You know, the biggest challenge we have is everybody understanding the rules, so we can everybody play by the rules and treat everybody the same. To say that we don't have it, to say that we're just working on it without a timeline, you know, it is alarming to me. And I know, Counselor, you're raising your hand, but you know, I want to see a definitive timeline. If we have a book of ordinances that we know are ordinances already, how difficult is it to get copies to us?
Well, what we don't want to happen, what we don't want to happen is give you an incomplete project. For us, a foundation for us to start on. And what's happened on the deal that last April was when we started this process, and then we have to undertake a different project. This is our priority now, okay? So within 2 weeks, we will have all the legwork to lay a foundation and say this is the most current project that we've got. And now our ordinance committee can start working from that point on.
I mean, I appreciate the work that's being done on it and appreciate you wanting to give us a complete project. However, if we're going to cite ordinances, okay, in council meetings, whether it's an action taken by the council, or an action taken by a citizen, or an action taken by members of city staff. Not having that ordinance or just getting it that day is not good. I would much rather have what you have now, knowing that it's incomplete, to review, so that I can ask the appropriate questions. So we don't have to sit here and oh, well, that ordinance is already on the book, or we're addressing that. I think we as a council must have whatever it is, whatever exists in the way of ordinances today. You know, that's a must. You know, and yeah, we know that it's incomplete. We know that there's going to be revisions, but at least we have something to base this upon. You know, to come up to a meeting, Andy, and say, okay, well, we want to do this. Well, how about that? Well, no, you can't do that, Councilman Miller, because the ordinance says you can't. What ordinance? Oh, well, here. I can't represent the people and ask the appropriate questions and point in the correct direction unless I have a good foundation. Okay? And granted, we don't have all of the bricks in the foundation, but to delay getting us anything so that we can say, here's a complete project, I don't think is a good idea.
Well, and I understand, and like I said, we are finalizing that, but that's why we have a permits department and a P&Z and the city manager to say, to do the legwork for you, and say, this is, we've done all this, we've got the engineers, we've got the attorneys, here's a product to get to you on that decision. But I understand that you want the ordinance so you can read it. But at the same token, I don't want you to have an incomplete project.
But, you know, we created the ordinance committee specifically to do this, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But if the ordinance is in effect, if it exists, or whether we think it's in effect, okay, those are the ordinances that we should be able to have. Now, I would give you this. Attorneys go back to law books. Our legislators go back to the Constitution as the basis for their guidance. We as council, in giving guidance to staff, in answering citizens' questions, we are bound by the city charter, the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Texas, all of which have been provided to council members, but we are also bound by those ordinances. Because many of those ordinances direct us. You know, they brought up a ethics ordinance that got passed by the previous council. I've been sitting on council for 4 months and have never seen this ethics ordinance that talks specifically about me. You know, we've got to have those in.
Sure.
Andy, did you say you need 2 more weeks to get them together?
We can definitely have a very good closer picture. Now, that doesn't include them being sent off and being codified, but we can have copies of the ordinances as they were passed within those 2 weeks.
How far back do you go?
Currently, we have 5 binders that are about yay thick that go back to 1960s that we're cross-referencing. And then we get into our most current ones that go into the last couple of years, which is where we're spending a lot of our time to make sure that all of those ordinances have been put in the book correctly.
Are they cataloged or categorized?
Yes, ma'am. They are numbered and they're kept in a catalog of book. And then we send, like I said, copies of those ordinances and they send us back in this format. So that's what we're working on now, is making sure that everything from the last 5 years has been cataloged correctly and is ready to be released.
So they're not categorized by topic, like if I wanted an ordinance on ethics, for example. On ethics, or how many goats can I keep on an acre of land, or how?
That's what the company does that we send it to. That's what they do.
Oh, it's
Yes, ma'am.
outsourced.
We categorize them by number here and by name that we can find them, but they actually codify them, excuse me. And they put the heading and then it goes in a certain portion in the binder, and that's what that company does for us.
And And where are these kept? Do we have a vault, or are they in the library, I mean, in the
They're
shelf?
kept in our vault, yes, ma'am, they are kept in our vault.
And I don't know what to say, but, I mean, it's a hearsay, but I thought I also had heard a while back that some of these ordinances weren't recorded. Is that any truth to that, or,
Recorded being,
like, I guess if they were passed, were they, I mean, I know they passed by council, but by the secretary, was it?
that's what we're finding. She sent a whole bunch of them in, we just got them back, and so we're double checking to make sure that every ordinance that was passed did get in that process, and that we haven't missed anything. That's what we're doing currently.
But there was some missed, or?
Not that we found so far, not that we found so far. So like I said, we're in the process of making sure that all of the agenda items have the ordinance, and that it's been sent off, and that we're ready to
And
go.
see, that's why it kind of makes it kind of, I'm not trying to make any waves either, but at the same time, is, you know, if we have, these for the past 5 years, well, those are more current, they should be like stacked here and say, well, read these first, and then we'll get you the 1968 later, you know.
Yeah, and the only issue that we have with that is like amending some of the prior ordinances. It might be an ordinance that passed in 1983, and we've just amended it. So it's an amended ordinance, it wouldn't necessarily be in the same it won't be chronologically there. And it's just a matter of honestly having the time to go through all of the agendas and take a look at it. But within 2 weeks, we definitely will be back.
I think,
Counselor?
If I could take just a second, maybe help Andy with it.
can we have the lights for
For the,
still
for
the
the council. We quit codifying, help me Andy on this, in late 90-something, 96, 95, 94. Up to then, we've been using a service, I think, out of Florida, or wherever they are. It codifies things. Like the resolution I read to you tonight, or that you passed tonight, that's a resolution that only covers one policy issue. It doesn't appear in the ordinance book and won't. The ordinance you passed tonight on the budget is a one-time budgetary ordinance. It won't appear in your ordinance book, okay, because it's this year. It's like Congress passes a budget, but it doesn't become part of the the permanent statute. Where we fell off is a few years ago, 10 or longer, we quit codifying. And actually, for some time now, I've been drafting ordinances that are basically single-shot ordinances. For example, when we did the ordinance to circumscribe the city and try and say what the boundary was, there was nothing to build upon except the 5 ordinances that existed that included the hospital, included Walmart, included about 3 other areas that are on that bypass over there, that one subdivision, I always forget the name of it. Northcrest. But we didn't have a city boundary that had everything properly surveyed. And so we went to the appraisal district, and that's how we got that first one, and then we came back and made the amendment about 4 council meetings ago. That's an example of a permanent ordinance that really won't be something you use every day, except to the fact that it shows you the map. What Andy and Sherry are struggling with is we've got this gap. I contributed to this gap where we come in and do a single-shot item and not reference a place in the existing book where it should be deleted or amended or added to. In other words, we weren't writing our ordinances in legislative format for the purposes of what we're talking about. And what I want to commit to is that from now on, when we draft an ordinance, it's going to be in legislative format. What Andy and Sherry got problems in is they got about a 10-year gap where none of the items were written in legislative format. We just come in and write an ordinance on a one-shot issue. And so that's got to be integrated. Okay? Am I helping to clarify what the problem
And do
is?
you have copies of some of these ordinances?
I've got copies of all the ordinances our office has been involved in.
So that's
I've tried to
interesting.
share those with Sherry, and I think she has all of them. But the problem with them is sometimes they don't fit that organizational mode thing. They don't fit it by chapter, they don't fit it by subject, they don't fit it by paragraph. So when I say we'll draft the future ones in legislative format, we're gonna say this ordinance will amend zoning procedure, paragraph 3, subsection 2, by adding the following. It will amend plating to subparagraph 4 by adding or deleting the following. So we'll write it in such a fashion, once they've done what they're doing, that we can pick up on the codified version, okay? So I'm trying to give you a little, understanding of the process and hoping that this will explain to you why Sherry and Andy have got a huge little gap to bite off, make sure we got them all. The other thing that we've done in the past, we tried to number them, but we've ended up numbering them by the date they passed, and not necessarily numbering them by the total number in the year, and they don't correspond to an index in the minutes. And so Sherry's having to go back and make sure that she picked up all of the ordinances of permanent nature that fit with the minutes. So it's a chore to go get caught up. And they were left that way about 10 years ago when the service was decontracted or the contract wasn't continued. Okay, so I hope that'll help. Temporary ordinances like street closings or resolutions, those won't be included. But permanent ordinances, if you're wanting, so that you know what it is. And the permanent ordinances are a minimum of those that are existing already. Now, if I could change topics and steal one moment here, I'd like to steal it on McCoy's. One of the real critical things on the McCoy's development, and I want to kind of key in and segue from your question about a add-on to somebody's house to the McCoy's development. And the reason the McCoy's development and the resolution involving McCoy's is significant for this council and significant for the manager and significant for the community is we came to you with the first item there, the September 13 item, if you could put it back up, Andy, just to show. But we came to you with a resolution that involved getting the approval, that first item there, it involved getting an approval of the 4B Corporation and an approval of the council. And we brought that to you because it involved two agencies of the city, and there was going to be a contribution to do the sewage or the wastewater under the road. It was going to involve them in some other manner. It was going to involve the manager in the Public Works Department doing some road work. And we had to have a comprehensive agreement with McCoy's to satisfy their requirement, so they'd have the city coordinated in how the city responded to their development scenario. Keeping in mind this is starting on raw land. And they were going to give you a park, they were going to give you certain other benefits, and they were going to leave certain land available for further development. So one of the reasons I want to mention the importance of that first resolution is because we were starting with raw land, we were starting with at least two city agencies, if not three, being involved in this. We brought it to the council and to 4B to get approval on money to be spent and a commitment to the project before we went forward. And we did this quite differently, and I remember the comment of last week. We did this quite differently than what we did more recently on storms. Okay? This was a coordinated interagency planning process by all of your agencies. And we got that commitment from the council, we got that commitment from the, where's Frank? From Frank's 4B, and then after we had that, we sat with McCoy's. And I think that's the scenario we discussed once upon a time not too long ago on how to start these processes so that we know how to end it. And the only part of this process that we might have done differently, and I'm going to say it, is we didn't make it clear where the building permits occurred in the process. We were relying on the ordinance and Cindy to fill that in. What we contractually agreed to were the major expenditures of time, effort, and money. Jake, but I do think, and I will defend the McCoy development because we came to the council first, we came to the 4B first, and we showed you what the thing would look like, and then we went forward. I'm trying to answer part of some questions we've had in dialogue. Okay? And I hope I'm explaining this. I'm just trying to supplement Andy. I'm not trying to contradict anything he said. It's just that we didn't talk about when the permits would be issued. Because we were talking about major dollars of the city. Okay?
Andy, I think we morphed into this last agenda item. And I think the real issue comes back to the ordinances. You know, and this goes into several pieces that we've talked about this evening, our web page as an example. We as a governing body set the rules. And if we say these are the rules and everybody applies to the same rules, then we don't have any issues. Not understanding what the rules are is a scary piece and leads to, well, in this case we do this, and in this case we do this, and in this case we do something else. And that may very well apply in building permits. It may not, I don't know. Some of the comments that were made at the last council meeting really begged the question. Certainly the ability to put this kind of information on a web page for future developers is going to be critical, you know, and as well as the citizens of our community to say, what are our permanent ordinances? And we'll go back to a previous council meeting where an ordinance committee was created specifically to begin addressing this issue of do we have ordinances that are incomplete, that need to be updated? Do we have duplicate ordinances? And in that process, I asked for our counselors to talk about the legality of creating an ordinance committee, and if city council members could be on that committee. And Mr. Hug prepared this nice memorandum that basically says that, yes, this committee should exist, and recommends that the committee be of 2 council members. And that committee is supported by city staff. As it is only 2 council members, they can't make any decisions. They can only make recommendations to council. I believe that I don't remember all of the appointments that we created on that audit committee by appointing city staff to that. We're probably ill-advised based upon what Mr. Hug is saying in this memorandum, and would propose to this council that we recreate or cancel the previous appointments to the audit committee, to the ordinance committee, and select 2 council members to serve as the ordinance committee to work with city staff on this. I look forward to seeing what we're going to have in 2 weeks, what we have now on the ordinances, but it certainly needs the help and the guidance of council in looking at these ordinances, and would strongly recommend that we would, cancel that previous appointment, or I don't know what's the word, but redo that audit committee so that it is in line with the recommendations of council.
The previous appointment members to the ordinance committee were Andy Johnson, city manager, Cindy Nichols from permits, Sheila Garza, municipal court judge, Griselda Cantú, utility clerk, Lorenzo Herrera, police chief, Jim Miller, councilman, and that was the initial appointment of the ordinance committee.
And I think in Mr. Hugg's recommendation that those people are certainly contributors to this committee, but would not be formal members of the committee, as would, representation from the Planning and Zoning Board, and as would representation from the Chamber of Commerce in looking at ordinances and laws that we're going to be having, but would give some more flexibility to the group. I am willing to serve on this committee. I think the ordinances are critical. I'm not going to self-appoint myself. But if there's another member of council that would like to participate in this, I know Mr. Rodriguez has expressed some interest in it, but I don't think it would be fair to appoint him in his absence.
Mr. Miller, would you like me to make that a consideration and action item for the next council meeting to do appointments to the ordinance committee?
Well, I think we kind of addressed that here that we just, in presentation, discussion, possible action, ordinance committee status. I think we have well published the agenda item, and I don't think we'd be in violation in appointing somebody tonight. Would you agree, Councilor?
Do you agree, Counselor?
I do agree.
Didn't hear you.
I thought yes, sir, was adequate, but I'll be more adequate.
Right. So we need two, or what is it?
He recommended that it be two members of the council. By putting three, you create the issue of scheduling meetings and those pieces. That would give the committee flexibility to meet, and it wouldn't be such a arduous tasking of city staff to do meetings. And because that committee wouldn't have any authority, but would simply be making recommendations to the council, who would in fact take the action.
Sure.
Mr. Miller, could I make, I don't even know if I can do it, can I make a recommendation since there's already councilmen that are serving on some of the other committees? Whatever councilman, are you serving anything, Mario, for sure?
No, Mario and I are maybe the ones not serving, and this has a greater flexibility for me, so if Mario's willing to volunteer, I'll volunteer.
That way everybody will be sitting on a committee. You know,
That would make it three though. And you have
The mayor's not on it, all minute, and
Well, if we currently on there, but
No, not even currently. Just remember when we took off because we couldn't appoint you. So I'm just saying so that every councilman.
well, I appreciate that every councilman should participate. I have very strong feelings about ordinances and do strongly want to participate in this.
the minute will be one, and one, Duro, Castillo.
She said it's more flexible, right?
He just said it.
Well, I won't have control of the time, so I can't, yeah, I won't have the flexibility.
So Mario, you
Go Mario.
I don't have the time either. I have my stepdad's been in Dallas for 20 years, and I help him out a lot there. These meetings are
Well, based on Ms. Pollock's recommendation, let's table this and put it as an action item at the next council meeting, and maybe Mr. Rodriguez would like to participate.
Just one last comment for the council's information. The sewer planning, which is the land use plan that the council approved after the recommendation came from the P&Z, will have a meeting, or he'll come and do a presentation April the 3rd. Can you talk to him anymore on what he's going to do, where, at what time?
That's basically the agenda, the first workshop.
Okay.
Those
We have a time.
items.
No time on that?
I believe it's 5:30. I need to see you confirm that.
Okay. That's all the copy of the email that I got.
It's a workshop, is it?
Yeah, it's his starting phase where he's gonna start with why do a future land plan, trends, demographics, economics, land use conflicts, vision for the future, and setting the schedule. of the introductory meeting.
He's showing 5 workshops there, he doesn't show any of the public meetings. There needs to be 2 public meetings on this as we get further through it.
As soon as we hear the time, I will forward that to the council.
Yeah, we're going to get a copy of it scheduled.
That's it, Mayor.
Before you close, Madam Mayor, we set the precedent in doing this at the first meeting in January for quarterly reports from boards. I would hope that in our first meeting in April, we can continue those reports from the boards, P&Z, 4A, 4B, as well as the Parks Foundation, who have made some significant progress, as the newspaper said a couple of days ago. And our municipal judge and the others that had reported, if we can include those on the agenda for that meeting.
They will, and each committee, the president will be notified.
I'm ready.
So I have a motion to table. May I have a second?
Mayor, because there was no specific consideration.
No, there's no.
Okay.
We
So
don't
we
need
may
action
agree
on
on
that.
that. We'll put it on the